lips, but if you don't, you can simply just imagine you have a straw just between your lips. So just want to just perk your lips just a little bit. And what we're going to do is breathe in through our nose, and then we're going to about 4 seconds, and then we're going to quickly just breathe out through our perched lips there. So we're going to just take a normal deep breath in with our mouth closed, and I'll give you a count. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and purse the lips as you breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, perch lips. 3, 4, 5, 6. And then once you feel comfortable, you can just close your eyes. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just try and continue doing that on your own, and just observe what's going on in your body. Just, with the breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just observe what's going on in your body, in your mind. And when thoughts drift off, just bring your attention back to the breathing, and just observe what's going on with your body. So we'll do that just for a few more minutes, a few more seconds here, and then we'll get started. Okay, so I just want to give you a little bit of taste of what breathing can do for you. And also, one thing that many people are not aware of is that each emotion has a corresponding rhythm of breath. So if you're happy, you breathe a certain way. If you're sad, you breathe a certain way. So each emotion, so our breath is constantly changing. And by simply doing some very simple breathing, like the straw breath, what you begin to experience is this increased awareness of how your emotion is changing throughout the day. And by just having awareness of your breath and learning some additional breathing techniques, you can really begin to champion your day and really experience your life from a self of self-regulation, self-control, and more introspective, for more introspective, thoughtful life. So I'll stop there. And again, you can learn more about the breathing techniques at throughout the discussion and from the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel better already. Speaking of the panelists, let's meet the panelists, see where you can follow them, get to know them a little bit better. Starting off, let's say hello to Dr. Lee Washington, Senior Medical Director at Aetna. How can we keep up with you, Dr. Washington?
Well, I have a LinkedIn profile that I've been told I need to update, so I will update it, but it is under Lee Washington, and really excited to join you and look forward to the discussion. I have to say that with the pandemic, traveling for me went from going to about 2 or 3 cities a week to not going anywhere for a couple of years. And when I started back, I always started almost placing bets on what it was I was going to forget with each trip. And when you mix traveling and virtual, sometimes it's hard to get either one right. So I realized I was being very rude earlier in the meeting. I had my hand up and it wasn't up for any reason. It was just that was how the profile came in. So I did take it down for those who may have been wondering. My hand's no longer sitting up there, like I have a question, but I'm really excited to join and look forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Awesome. Don't worry about it. We all need to update our LinkedIn profile. We know you. We're going to get to know you tonight. And you already met our next guest in meditation, Dr. Robert Carter, U.S. Army Colonel and the best-selling author. How do we follow you?
Yeah, so I have a website with my wife, the Morning Mind dot com. So you can learn more about the work that we're doing, and also have a LinkedIn profile as well. So you can find me there, Robert Carter III. So, and I probably need to update mine as well, like Dr. Washington.
Understandable. Now let's meet Reverend Thomas Bowen, Director of the Mayor's Office of African American Affairs. Can you please share your information?
Thank you, Britt. You can follow me on my LinkedIn profile. I'm don't plan on updating it. It is as is. But also my Twitter handles, my personal Twitter handle is Tom, THOM, Bowen, BOWEN. And then our work handle is for religious affairs is @_Mora, MORADC, and African American Affairs is @MOA, MOAAA_DC.
All the specifics, love it. And next up is Deputy Director at DC Health, Clover Barnes.
Good evening, Britt. Thank you. And you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. And I think my profile might actually be updated slightly.
There we go.
And DC Health has pages on Twitter, on TikTok, and even on IG. And so you can follow all those at DC Health.
That's exciting. I love TikTok. I need to update my TikTok too. Thank you to all of the panelists and to all of you joining. I'll be your host leading you through the entire night, but feel free to add your own questions. If I forget something, put it in our chat and we'll definitely try to get those in at the end. Like I said, I'm Britt Waters. You can follow me on social media at It's Britt Waters and as LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. My TikTok is just me talking about wrestling though, so that's probably not going to help you. But let's get into our conversation. And I want to start with you, Dr. Barnes, because the biggest thing when it comes to health, it's all over the news, it's all over social, it's on our minds, is the pandemic, COVID-19. I mean, it's affecting us all. But Black History Month, the reason we're having this forum is how it hit the Black community specifically harder than others. Can you talk about that?
Yes, and it definitely has affected the Black community, especially in DC, harder than it has others. It's been well documented that the Black community has experienced higher rates of total infections, and Black folks have been sicker and even more likely to die of COVID-19. The differences in race in terms of COVID-19 immunization coverage, both the primary series and the booster, meaning like the first shot, or two, depending on which one you got, and the booster, have been a big factor. So a lot of people, African Americans in particular, have not been vaccinated. You know, if you look at the community that's older, 65 and up, the African American community has the highest rates of vaccination. But anybody under 65 and going on into children, the rates are significantly lower. We saw much higher deaths in African Americans when the Omicron wave hit. It seemed to hit the African American community harder. And we think that is a lot because of lower vaccine rates, underlying health conditions, and likelihood to work in a field where you're more exposed to COVID-19. But these are all symptoms of a larger set of issues or inequity that we see as opportunities here in DC, the inequity and opportunities of employment, of housing, and higher education, and structural racism. And these were all exacerbated throughout the pandemic. If you think about it, our unemployment rate in March of 2020 was 5.2%. And in March of 2021, it was up to 7.2%. And that was even further exacerbated in Ward 8, where we see the highest rates of African Americans living. It increased from 11.7% to 16.1% in that same time period. And this is just one example of the consequences of COVID-19. But if you think about if people are unemployed, then that decreases their access to all the other things they need, to healthy food, to making sure their utilities are together, to having a roof over their head. And if you don't have a roof over your head or know where your next meal is coming from, the last thing you're worried about is getting COVID-19, right? So we need to look at those social determinants of health as well as we look at how the COVID-19 pandemic affected African Americans in the district. 48% of all COVID-19 infections in the districts were in African Americans, and that's compared to 46% of the district's population are African Americans. And 76% of all the deaths from COVID-19 in the district have been in the African American community. And so it's really something that we need to pay attention to. We may be done with COVID, but COVID isn't done with us. So I think we still need to continue to have our armor on and our protections up around what are we doing to keep ourselves personally safe from COVID.
Absolutely. Thank you for that information. I'm sure some people are watching this and it is alarming. It is scared, or even if they're not a part of that minority group, they want to know how they can help. How can we recover from these pretty drastic numbers?
Yes, the first thing you can do is to get vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, get boosted. And to make sure that you and your family, your children are all vaccinated, and that you are watching, knowing that it takes 2 weeks to be considered fully vaccinated from the time that you get your second vaccination, if you're getting one of the mRNA vaccinations, which are Pfizer or Moderna, or 2 weeks from your first and only shot from Johnson & Johnson. And that within the time frame, you get a booster. I believe it's 4 months after your first one. And that will keep you as protected as we can be at this point from severe illness from the COVID-19 pandemic. It won't necessarily stop you from getting COVID. So that's well documented as well. I don't want people to think that vaccine means you're not going to get it at all, but it does lessen your likelihood to be sick and hospitalized from COVID.
Thank you, Director Barnes. And I hope you got outside yesterday. Hope everyone got outside yesterday if they're in DC. It was spring. I don't know what happened because right now it's winter again. I blame that's just DC weather for you. I'm around a lot of meteorologists. They can't explain it either. But as things warm up, spring comes, restrictions are loosening up a bit. People are tired. They want to hit the streets. So those vaccines that you talked about are more important than ever, but there is vaccine hesitancy, especially in the Black community. How do we even approach the topic? Can you explain why it's so difficult? Because I want to go out in the spring.
I think we all are ready to go out. And yesterday was a lovely taste of spring that we all need and want.
We need to see those cherry blossoms.
Yes, we're looking forward to that. But in that same time, we need to be protected. The Department of Health did a qualitative study on vaccine hesitancy very early in the pandemic. And in that study, we found that the historical mistreatment of Black people by the medical community, feelings that the vaccine development was rushed and not sufficiently tested for long-term side effects, and the arrival of a vaccine for a new disease when there aren't even vaccines for diseases that we've had for a long time, were all reasons that folks gave for not wanting to get vaccinated. Given that we're now beyond a year of vaccine distribution and we can documented the side effects and the safety and effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccines, our approach now is to use the data on its effectiveness and in combating the Delta and the Omicron variants as they came in as a method to try to increase vaccine confidence. Additionally, our approach is to meet people kind of where they are. So we've demonstrated that by having trusted ambassadors throughout the community. We've had faith leaders, we've had community centers, schools, fire departments. We tried to kind of cultural groups meet people where they are and making it very routine to get the shot. Just like we got shots for measles, mumps, flu shots, all those things, we should be getting those shots. Some things that people should know. Without a booster shot, a person is 5 times more likely to get infected with COVID-19. Without a booster shot, a person is 2 times more likely to be hospitalized for COVID-19. And without a booster, a person is 6 times more likely to die from COVID-19. So I implore you, I'm vaccinated and boosted. So are my children that are eligible. I encourage everybody, my parents, to be vaccinated
That's
and
true.
to go outside.
Yes, we want to be outside. And if we're vaccine boosted, make sure your friends are vaccine boosted, your parents, all of that. We talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's another pandemic going on. I think it's described as the misinformation pandemic. Instead of people asking their doctors, they ask their friends, they ask the Starbucks barista, they ask social media, and then you just can't always trust that. So what resources does DC Health offer that can help residents stay safe and informed and get the real COVID information?
Very good. DC Health offers a myriad of ways that you can get information. I talked about our Facebook, our Instagram, our TikTok, our Twitter. Those are all ways, but you can always go to coronavirus.dc.gov and every bit of information that you need is there. You can find out where to get it tested, how to order a test kit to come to your house if you want somebody to come to your house and test you, if you want a booster, if you want a shot, if you need whatever, you need masks, all the information around whatever you need surrounding coronavirus can be found at coronavirus.dc.gov. You can reach it on your cell phone, you can reach it on your computer, you can go to the library. If you don't have internet access, they have free internet access for you. You can use the computers there, but that is kind of your one-stop shop to get whatever you need, to search it up, to read about it, information, factual information is all on coronavirus.dc.gov.
Thank you. If they can access this form, they can access your information. Leave your baristas alone with your questions. I appreciate you. I want to turn to Aetna's Senior Medical Director, Dr. Lee Washington, who has spent some time working to also inform the public about vaccinations, with the main focus being informing the Black community. What do you want to tell us about the COVID-19 vaccine that you don't think we already know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And first, let me say, as a coffee drinker, I have nothing against baristas, but I agree that is not the way you want to go for sources of information. And unfortunately, there are some in the scientific community that have put out inaccurate information as well. Fortunately, that's a small group, but they do exist. So I'll just share that to the first concern that was raised about how quickly the vaccine made it from research into market. I think it's important to understand this is a really novel technology, novel in the sense that it's never been used to develop a vaccine before, but it is a technology that's been around for a long time, the RNA technology. And because of the nature of that technology, it allows for precision and speed in developing vaccines. It can be done very safely. And this has really set a new standard for how we think vaccines and other therapeutics will be developed in the future. This vaccine has been tested on millions of people, and it is a very safe vaccine. I've been vaccinated fully as well as boosted, and so there's not anything to worry about from the vaccine. Now, you do hear of in young populations for the RNA vaccines, young men, you do hear of some instances of heart inflammation that is transient. It goes away, and it's a very, very small percentage. So the number of severe side effects in that category is extremely small. The other thing I tell people is that when you're dealing with a virus as infectious as coronavirus, you're not dealing with the choice of a vaccine or nothing. You're typically dealing with a choice of the vaccine or coronavirus. And if you look at the risk of coronavirus, as has already been mentioned by Deputy Barnes, you've got this whole notion of risk of hospitalization, severe disease, death. You also have a risk of significant long-term effects that can even result in people who have relatively mild cases of coronavirus. And what we've seen in our industry is that getting vaccinated not only prevents you from those severe problems early on, but it also reduces the likelihood that you're going to go on a higher cost trajectory because of long-term complications from the virus. Really important to think about the fact that the virus infects every cell in the body. It can potentially infect every organ. And so the respiratory system is what we worry about in the short term, but we certainly have seen people who have gotten infected where we have to worry about the cardiac system, the kidneys, and even the brain. So there are some significant potential complications tied to this. And the vaccine, as I like to say as a basketball fan, you mentioned the Wizards earlier, getting vaccinated is a slam dunk when you compare that to the risk of the virus.
Yeah. Wizards could use a couple extra slam dunks for sure. Hopefully they come back strong after this all-star break. We'll see. Game day tomorrow. But I also want to talk to you about other things. I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic isn't the only issue plaguing the Black community, unfortunately, especially when it comes to health. And you spent time working in private practice as a family medical caregiver. So you had that firsthand witnessing being with families that had major health issues in our community. What are some of those issues that need to be on our radar?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing I would stress is that a lot of times we put a lot of trust in our physicians, and that's not a bad thing by any means. But I think it's also important to look at the resources that you have with family and with others. And if you can be informed to the extent that you can be about your condition going in to see your physician, that's also important, because that's going to help make you more of a partner and a collaborator with that physician, so you can work on getting the best care possible. And recently I gave a talk to a governmental group, and I shared what I thought were really important things to think about when it comes to managing chronic conditions. And so I talked about the 4 S's. S number 1 is second opinion. So not relying on a single opinion. The human body is very complex. No single individual fully understands it. Being able to get a second opinion can give you really important insights. And there are new technologies, new science that's emerging all the time. You might be shocked to hear this statistic, but it takes on average about 17 years from the time that something new in science gets established to the time that it is widely incorporated into practice. So for the first S, think second opinion. The second S, stress. Thank you, Dr. Carter, for that exercise earlier today. I feel a lot less stressed from that. And what we know about stress is that how you manage it can play a big role on whether it has impacts on your physical and psychological health. When we think about mental health and mental well-being, we're all on a continuum where we can be very mentally well, where we have a really good sense of well-being, to the opposite end of the spectrum, where we can have multiple mental health conditions. But many of us find ourselves somewhere in between. And what we found is that each stage on that continuum has real implications for how well you do in terms of your physical health. And so even people without a mental health diagnosis who just are stressed a lot or just not feeling good about life, we've seen that they are more likely to develop chronic conditions. And so being able to manage it through techniques like what Dr. Carter has introduced us to and other approaches. Along those lines, we think about adverse child events. A lot of adverse child events are tied to later development of health conditions. And we know that if there is a healthy relationship with an adult role model, that can help mitigate the future development of health conditions. So first S, second opinion, second S, stress, third S, sleep, which is related to stress. When you look at sleep, there's a major study out there that showed that African Americans are much less likely to suffer from short sleep as compared to other populations. That directly correlates with risk of cardiovascular disease. And so getting 7 or more hours of sleep a night is really important. And if you should have a sleep condition, getting that checked out, getting it diagnosed is really critical as well. So I think I covered 3 S's, right? Second opinion, stress, sleep.
Yes.
And the 4th S, which a lot of times we neglect, is social networks, which really impacts on almost all of those. There's a really interesting piece of literature out there by a couple leading scientists that have shown that it's not just the people you know that affect you, but people out to 3 degrees of separation can affect you. Things that they say, things that they do have an impact on how you feel, what choices you make, and you don't even know who these people are. And one interesting little qualitative assessment that they did is, if you ask the question, I'll ask you this question. Obviously, you don't have to answer it, but just think about it. The last time you had a job that was a major upgrade from your previous job, statistically, think about, well, so for you as an individual, think about who introduced you to that job. from a statistical perspective, it's not likely that someone who is within your first degree network introduced you. It's probably not a family member, probably not a close friend. It's probably someone you didn't know very well. And the rationale behind that is that people that you know really well probably know pretty much the same thing that you know, but those who are a little bit outside of your network are more likely to have contacts that you don't have. And so when you think about 3 degrees of separation, that means that each of us on average affect half the universe roughly. That's about half the population. The things you say, the things you do, and other people impact you, things they say and things they do, and you may never see them. What's most obvious many times is, of course, that first degree where the wife gains weight, and then statistics say that it's very likely the husband's going to follow suit not long thereafter. I once had a couple who were in their 80s, great couple. And whenever I talked to them, I found out I had to talk to them together, because whenever I talked to them separately, the husband always said, well, she always cooks fatty food, that's why I can't lose weight. And the wife always said, I cook healthy food, but he never eats it. So, you know, it's always those relationships that are also critical. So remember the 4 S's: second opinion, sleep, stress, and social networks.
Second opinion, sleep, stress, social networks. Tweet that, write it down, stick it on your refrigerator. That is so important. I feel like I need to get more of all of those. It's really important. And the social stuff, even if you just spend some time on the phone with people, or in some forums like this, or Fit DC events, really good opportunities to tap into that 4th S. But I also want to talk about why our community, the Black community, is particularly vulnerable when it comes to these health things. I have so many friends that are like, yeah, I haven't seen my dentist in a couple of months. I ain't seen my doctor. I'm like, why are we so afraid of the doctors, and why are we so vulnerable to health issues?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of historical reasons that track into that, some of which can be impacted in the short term, and some is harder to impact in the short term. But you think about it, and this was already alluded to by Deputy Barnes, this whole notion of trust and past abuses that has created some barriers. And so there's a hesitancy by many people to seek care. That can be compounded in the short run, because there may be a shortage of healthcare professionals who look like them, that they may not be inclined as much to relate to someone who doesn't, and therefore they may not be likely to seek care. I think when we look at the tendency to seek care, a huge factor is whether that person, if you're talking about the dentist, do they have a dentist that they know, that they've gone to for years? Do they trust them? They're probably not going to be delaying care seeking. Although I have to say that my dentist once said that he was willing to drill on me and the insurance would cover it, so I should come in and get drilled on. It wasn't clear why he wanted to. I decided to pass on that visit. But within reason, I think that we do see that there is a level of trust when you know the person and there's that longitudinal history. It kind of gets back to social networks a little bit. And a lot of times there are certain relationships that you have. So if you see people in your family who are doing certain things, you're more likely to do it, as opposed to if they avoid the doctor like the plague. So I think those are all factors that can play a role. The other thing I'll mention is that there's a really interesting body of literature out there by a guy, Dr. Kleinman, who's trained both as a physician and an anthropologist. And one of the things he says when and he's been around for a long time, so he probably isn't doing this anymore, but one of the things he used to guide people on is this whole notion that when you're trying to get someone into treatment, asking a question that we may not normally ask, which is, what do you fear most about the disease that you have? And what do you fear about its treatment? When you ask those questions, you open up the room for a dialogue. And, you know, I've seen that work on people who are from other countries, whether it's Vietnam or some other countries. Being able to give people permission to talk about what they fear makes them less embarrassed and more likely to allow those situations to be addressed. So I think there's a lot that we can do as an industry, and certainly it's something that we consider high priority at CVS Aetna.
Thank you. Absolutely. And just it being Black History Month, we hear so many of these powerful stories of how Black people have weathered storms. So we can get over the storm of our own health and visiting the doctor. I love what you mentioned about making that personal connection. just as much as you might miss your barber or miss your hairdresser and be like, oh, I can't wait to go back so we can get caught up. It's good to have those conversations with your doctor as well. Have a personal connection and not be afraid of those things. And we shouldn't have to live in pain. I tell my family all the time, I'm like, Dad, if your arm hurts, go get it checked out. Don't just say, oh, I guess my arm hurts today. Or if you're having something going on, you shouldn't have to live with that, right?
That's absolutely right. I think that a lot of times when you have that conversation with folks, they realize there can be a better way, not only in terms of feeling better, but being less likely to have a bad outcome happen. One of the things I say is that we have a lot of tools in place that are designed to keep bad things from happening. And a lot of things are much better prevented than to try to deal with them after they've occurred. So absolutely.
Yeah, catching things early. Well, I don't want everyone to get overwhelmed. Can you share some maybe simple everyday things that we can do to decrease our chances of being exposed to chronic illnesses?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So there's a number of things that we think about. So if you start out with where the chronic illnesses, what the highest prevalence chronic illnesses are in the African American community, you think about hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And you also think about the stress that underlies the development of a lot of those. So if I alluded to earlier, this notion of adverse child events, for each adverse child event a person has experienced, and by definition, an adverse child event is a traumatic event that the child or adolescent has a hard time processing. Some never really fully process these events. They're much more likely to be stored as chronic stress in the body, which contributes to a overactive sympathetic nervous system. That you can think of that as the stress nervous system, and that predisposes to multiple types of diseases. One of the things that we found historically is this whole notion that if you have a mental health diagnosis or you have a mental health condition, you're much more likely to also have a physical health condition. What was debated for a long time was whether one situation caused the other. Since then, a major longitudinal study has come out that indeed shows that if you have a diagnosed mental health condition and it is unaddressed, you're much more likely to develop the hypertension, the heart disease. And so dealing with those chronic stresses are really important. And we've heard some about these personalized meditation or awareness practices that we can engage in. And I think that's important. I also think that we tend to do things, and when I say we, I mean we as a community, any community, we tend to do things together or not do them together. So I think it's also really important to pay attention to that network and to try to move the needle across that network, because that's what's going to embed those types of practices in the community. That's really the earliest idea of prevention, trying to deal with the stress, getting a mental health conditions or stress or depression addressed early. And then there are the common risk factors that we know about when it comes to heart disease, diabetes. So dietary, healthy diet, high fiber, high fruit and vegetables. We know about smoking. We want to stay away from that. There's some things we can't do anything about, like family history. One of the things I will say is that hypertension is a really important topic. And when you think about that, there is a capability that we have that enables a person to sort of track how their heart rate and some of their cardiovascular variables respond to different circumstances. And what we found is that we can decrease some of those cardiovascular risk factors by making a person more aware. So one thing that I personally do is I try to get my steps in every day, because I know that when I do that, I'm going to have a lower blood pressure. And things like that, being able to make those connections is really important. But if we talk about the common risk factors for cardiovascular disease, which I've been hearing about for 35 years, so technically longer than I've been alive, since I'm only 32, hypertension, smoking, high fat diet, sedentary lifestyle, those are all things that we can do things about through our choices. And then when you think about diabetes, there is the ability that we have to, and increasingly this is being done in a number of settings, including work that we're doing with some of our providers, personalizing the diet so that you are less likely to go into prediabetes and diabetes. This may come as a surprise, but we don't all respond the same way to the same dietary intake. And when we can personalize that, we have a better chance of staying out of diabetes. If we do go into diabetes, personalizing the treatment becomes really important as well.
Thank you. Those are definitely things to keep in mind. I do want to go back for a second and ask you, what did you do about that couple, the woman that was cooking all of the foods? Because I run into that issue all the time. My mom makes really good mac and cheese and fried chicken, and I'm like, can we get a salad in the rotation?
Yeah, you know what they say is that if you're in a meeting with more than one or two people and you don't know who the mark is, chances are the mark is you. So I kind of got them both together in the room at the same time and said what my observations were. They both looked at each other and grinned, and I got the feeling I was being left out of the joke. I will say they were 80 years old, so by rights they probably had earned the right to eat whatever they want. But I have a feeling I didn't make any change. I didn't move the needle in that situation at all. I have to acknowledge.
It's all about balance. Thank you so much for your time. That really helped.
Very welcome. My pleasure.
Now let's go to Dr. Robert Carter, U.S. Army Colonel and best-selling author. I'm really excited for this portion of the conversation because I have to admit, I don't sleep as much and it affects my mornings. My alarm goes off at 2 a.m. So I'm going to need to get a copy of the book, The Morning Mind. Let's talk about the book.
Yes, first of all, I want to really thank Dr. Washington. I feel like I was a Washington Wizard basketball player, and he was throwing me alley hoops because much of what I'm going to talk about is directly related to the conversation and the pertinent information that he provided to us. Stress is such a major problem in communities, in particular communities of color. Stress, recognize stress, and just the stress that we don't recognize is one of the important contributors to chronic disease, mental health, and many of the issues that we see in communities of color. And so what I would like to really start off with is really talking about, things that we can actually do to take control of our lives. And the first thing we can actually do is really take control of something that we do every day. If we don't wake up that day, then we can't take control of it. But our life each day really starts in the morning. And I want to talk about a good morning really is predicated, obviously, on having a good night. But if you don't have a good night, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that sleepless night impact your morning. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is The Morning Mind. I'll talk about why I wrote the book and really the things that led to that. I co-authored the book actually with my wife, who's a physician. So I have to take credit for at least half of what's in the book and give her credit to the other half. But it really was a interesting how the book evolved and became a thing. But again, taking control of your morning is probably one of the most important things that you can do to empower every day of your life. To be productive, energetic, and really focus on your big goals and treating your mornings with care and respect. Unfortunately, many of us, wake up in chaos. Many of us may work from home, and we're not used to now we're used to the pandemic where we basically may not have to go into the office or maybe not go into the office as often. So often, we just roll out of bed, 5 minutes before the first Zoom call, get on the call, and skip a lot of the things that we traditionally would do if we had to go into the office. And so really, it's really about stopping the chaos in your morning and really becoming the ruler of your mornings. And so one of the things that people ask all the time, why did I write the book? Why did we write the book? And everything that's in the book really were things that we studied. I'm a physiologist, PhD physiologist. She's a physician. Things that we studied, but in many ways had not necessarily, at least I didn't incorporate into my life. She introduced me to breath-based meditation, as the sky meditation. And again, the listeners can find out more about those at Fit DC and much of the campaign. Really amazing results. So in the book, the portion of the book specifically about meditation and diet, definitely I can't take credit for that because I had a horrible diet And definitely I wasn't necessarily using the physiological knowledge that I gained throughout my studies. But
It
again,
doesn't show.
yes. But one of the things that when writing in the morning or writing in general is a process that forces you really to go inside. It forces you, whether you're a good writer or maybe you think you're not a good writer, regardless, writing is one of the things that you can do to basically take your thoughts inside. And so through writing, you gain a perspective about what matters to you. So we wrote this book from the space of what mattered to us, things that we needed to do to improve the quality of our lives, or things that we were doing that actually improve the quality of our lives. So people ask me a lot of times and ask her, do we do everything that's in the book? No, but it was an insight into, and again, we're slowly adapting, and eventually, hopefully before we're 80, we will actually incorporate everything that's in the book into our lives, and we practice those, in a routine. But it's really about first getting started. But writing or reading about things that matter to you will help you gain a perspective on what's important to you. So writing down what's important to you, either you can write a book or you can get a book that will help you improve your overall life. So writing a book will teach you about the unique values of your own willpower. First of all, writing a book can be hard, but it's not impossible. It's something that really will create, it makes you more humble, and writing will also help you, whether you decide to publish it or not. It will allow you to see things in your own life and really teach you a lot about your own life. And so many people have the desire to do these types of creative works or really take on an initiative, but it's much safer for a unrealized dream if we don't take action on it, because many times we have this fear of failure. And much of that is often nested in the unrealized stress. So whenever we're thinking about the morning, and why is the morning so important portion of our day? Because the quality of what you do in the morning impacts your entire day. It's going to basically, if you wake up with a chaotic morning, you wake up stressed, you wake up late for that first meeting, you wake up again just in a negative state of mind, your entire day is more likely to be unproductive. And so one of the ways that you can improve productivity in the morning is really planning, incorporating healthy habits into your life, and that will take you so far. So what I want to really share with you is first of all, from my perspective, these are things that I see as requirements in my daily life to be productive. And one of the first things is to wake up early. So you described that you went to bed, your alarm clock woke you up at 2 a.m. If that's what happens, start your day. There are times, unfortunately, when I have to stay up and do work. I would love to go to bed every night at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, but there are times when there's stuff I have to finish. And regardless if I'm up till 1 or 2 in the morning, I wake up at the same time, because that's the first step in really establishing routine. It doesn't cost you anything. If you went to bed at 1 a.m. and even if you slept to 6, 7, or 8, it's less than 7 hours. So why not actually take that time to establish an empowering habit? So waking up early is obviously predicated often on having a decent night's sleep. But again, it's not always practical, because sometimes our schedules force us to stay up later. Some of us work shift work. So the bottom line, establishing, if you work shift work, it's whatever time you have to wake up, if it's midnight to go to work, that's your morning. The second is really nested in creating a morning routine that sets you up for success. And what is that?
Before you, I want to get into that first one first, because
Yes.
I need to know what to do when the alarm goes off to not hit snooze, because I feel like everyone hits snooze at least 2 or 3 times.
Yes. And
what do you tell yourself?
The first thing is that you can't put the alarm clock, and many of us use our cell phone, right? The cell phone is right next to the bed. Many folks actually don't even own alarm clocks anymore. We use our phone for everything. It's really creating a safe distance. where your phone is not next to you. So you can put the phone in the bathroom. I mean, you want to put it where possibly you have to wake up where you can hear it, but you have to put it somewhere where you have to get up, because the thing is that research shows that if you get out of bed, you're less likely to return back to bed. And if you're, over the age of 50, your bladder will prevent you from going back to bed. You will. So as you age, is that creating that distance will actually force you. You're less likely to return back to bed. So that is the critical piece. And what
I love that. I also
describe-
do this little trick. On your iPhone, you can like name the alarms.
Yes.
One of my alarms says Beyonce is awake. So I feel bad snoozing it, because I'm like, if Beyonce's up, I need to get up.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, let's get into your next tip, because there's so many things that can set your morning off. And whether a metro delay, your coffee order's wrong, someone's on your favorite machine in the gym. How do we move past that?
Yeah. So again, it's like I was describing, is really doing those deliberate steps when you wake up in the morning, because research shows that by doing, again, deliberate planning in the morning and taking deliberate steps can actually help us improve our self-awareness. And most importantly, we enter the world from a specific state of mind. So again, if you wake up stressed, chaotic, you're upset because your alarm woke you up at 2 a.m. You wake up thinking about the coworker that upset you yesterday. All of those things are going to put you, because the tendency of the mind is to focus on the negative. And so everything that you encounter that day will tend to basically bring up the negative qualities in us. So one of the things that you can do is as soon as you wake up in the morning, is just have a positive affirmation. Some people use mantras to induce certain feelings or states of mind. You can simply say something like, I am exceptional, or you can just say something, I am getting better and better. So it can be something that at the end of the day, even if you don't believe it, you keep saying it, eventually it will become your reality. And then as I presented before, practicing deep breathing. So just a few minutes in the morning of deep breathing. As I described before, each breath has a corresponding emotion. So deep breathing tends to be related to positive feelings. And so by doing that, that will just help bring those positive feelings into the body. And also just doing, I know Dr. Washington talked about the importance of exercise, but just getting out of the bed, stretching, and maybe doing a few push-ups or squats or sit-ups in the bed, something that gets the muscle activated is also a very refreshing way. So if you want to reach over to hit the snooze button, if you just say, okay, I hit the snooze button, I'm gonna just do a few sit-ups in the bed or get on the floor and do push-ups or squats, something that gets you out of the bed is so important, because hitting that snooze is also a negative reinforcement. It's more likely, as we talk about in the book, it's more likely to activate that lizard brain, which is actually the original title of the book, was Hacking the Wizard to Silence the Lizard. The other thing I think I talked about before is ignore the technology. Be in the present moment, right? Because if you start looking at the clock, at least, for me, you look at the clock and then, then you look at the news, you look at, text, and next, you're reading, most of the stuff in the news is negative, right? And probably things that you didn't do yesterday is going to evoke some negative emotion. And then the other thing is drinking a little bit of warm water. So I got this handy little device that basically sits next to the bed, and at a particular time I can get like a nice sip of warm water. That has a lot of benefits, on the gut brain interface. And the one thing that most of us do, at least we should do in the morning, we take a shower. So Vice is just getting in the shower, splashing the water around. Just imagine the water flushing away negative emotions. So that's something that you're going to do anyway. So take advantage of everything that you're going to do anyway to actually create a positive mindset. And then the other piece is really a healthy breakfast. Healthy breakfast, a lot of people say, I don't have time to do it. That doesn't mean you have to go and cook, bacon and eggs or something like that. You can just take something, healthy, a fruit, glass of warm milk, something that's going to provide your body with some nourishment. So, and then the last thing that I really talked, quite a bit about, and that is something that is so important, specifically for folks, for people in the Black communities of color, is to practice self-gratitude. That's something that we don't actually do enough. And waking up from a space of gratitude is so important. And then practicing gratitude each morning, and be sure that's going to evoke positive emotions. So even if somebody, like, for example, cut you off on the road, think about, there was a traffic accident I could have experienced, but that person saved me 5 seconds of cutting me off prevented me from getting an accident maybe 20 minutes later. So look for opportunities to, when people do negative things to you, that you turn that into an opportunity to destroy a negative feeling and turn that into a positive feeling. So gratitude, self-gratitude, gratitude towards others will empower you and allow you to have a much more productive day and throughout your life.
Next time we do this, we got to get some gift bags, because you guys have me getting a whole shopping list. I mean, a fit watch so I can track my heart, a new journal to write in, that heated coaster that you had. These things are just small things that we can get that can really change our perspective and our mornings and our health, which is super important, especially this month, because we can't talk about Black history and the Black experience without mentioning that there is Black trauma there. So yeah, your book is not just an asset for any community, but specifically our community. I know you've experienced that before as well. Can you talk about guiding and healing over those moments?
Yeah, so I grew up in the South. I grew up in Louisiana, and I can definitely tell you, a whole host of experiences, where growing up with fear of the police, for example, is something that is unfortunately part of the of the Black male experience and people of color. And specifically, I can talk about it as a Black male. I remember driving while I was in graduate school to visit my grandparents in Mississippi from Louisiana, and I was stopped, after midnight on a highway where the police, basically took out all of my belongings and literally left all of my things out of the car on the side of the highway. I didn't know what was going to happen at that experience. And so let's fast forward, just a week and a half ago, I was driving on 95 between Baltimore and Aberdeen, Maryland, and not speeding. Police profiled. I was in a car in a van with my wife. He pulled up and followed me for a while until he was able to find a reason to pull me over. Once he pulled me over, he realized that, first of all, I was in uniform. I had karate uniforms in the back, and then he noticed I had U.S. Army on the car, Texas plates. Clearly recognized that I'm in Maryland. I'm probably in the military. So his aggression, was lowered, but I had a certain amount of fear, due to that trauma. And I would say, my wife looked at me and she was like, "Are you okay?" And, and again, that was an opportunity where, before I learned basically how to self-regulate, how to calm myself down, having breathing practices, that would have been something that I would have taken with me to bed that night. I would have woke up probably a little bit upset the next morning. But again, by having techniques where you can basically self-regulate, impulse control is so critical, specifically for our communities. I was reading a study last week, actually, and it talked about that people of color, specifically Black Americans, that experience what I experienced, as a in my early 20s, that when we look at the brain, the impact that it has specifically on certain regions of the brain will on MRI look very similar to trauma. So if you have someone that experienced racism and they experience some degree of trauma, that basically will set them up for many of the things Dr. Washington talked about. there's a significant elevated risk of mental health disorders, chronic disease, stroke, and further brain problems later in life, to possibly include Parkinson's and other diseases related to the nervous system. So earlier neurodegeneration.
Wow, it's definitely something that we can't just overlook. You have to overcome, you have to guide yourself. We have to heal from the trauma that we experience every day.
Yes, no, that's critical. And part of it is that, like, I think the previous speakers talked about this, but there's a significant amount of fear within the community. And unfortunately, if we don't gain control over what I talk about as the lizard brain in the book, which is responsible for processing threats and activating these strong emotional responses when we're in situations, and often referred to as the fight or flight response. We know the fight or flight is related to chronic disease. We know it increased the risk of high blood pressure. And there's this, what's referred to in the medical literature as this weathering effect. You can relate to that. And so if you think about, like, your health as being a beach, and as the beach is hit by hurricanes, as it's hit by runoff, it just has a weathering effect. And if you've ever been to a beach that basically has not been repaired, what it looks like, you can just tell that beach has been just worn down. And that basically is an analogy, is what is believed to contribute to the high rates of chronic disease and undiagnosed mental health within our community. So and unfortunately, if I go to the doctor and I describe him having this weathering effect, that there isn't anything in the medical textbook, right? There isn't any diagnosis that Dr. Washington can put into the computer that he can prescribe me medicine for. And so maybe I get diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder or some mental health condition. Maybe I have, I'm developing some degree of high blood pressure, but the underlying cause is this trauma, stress, and not me really not having the awareness of what's going on in my body. So we have to look for ways that deal with the overall impact on our physiology, as opposed to a medicine cabinet of medicine with contraindications. Not saying medicine is bad, but again, that's why you begin to see a lot of health conditions diagnosed so early in life, in people, right? And then by the time they're in their mid 50s or 60s, their bodies, if they're still alive, their bodies basically have the physiology of someone at least 3 or 4 decades older than them. So combination of traditional medicine, physical activity, diet, specifically gaining control over our stress, is just so important for us as we move forward. The last thing, go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you. Like, we don't have to continue to be what we went through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the last thing I'll leave you with is that this is something I share with my daughter. I say, if your mornings are crazy, your wizard will be lazy. Your lizard will take control, and you will likely not achieve your daily goal. At the end, you will grow old and think, why didn't I take control of my life? And so I'll leave you with that on the morning mind, and just the overall importance of controlling our lizard brain so that we can live from a space of our wizard brain where we have more self-control, regulation, and others.
Yes, take control before we get old. Thank you so much. I want to continue these conversations, but I also want to remind everyone, if you have questions of your own, please use our Q&A function, our chat box, and definitely get some of your personalized questions in as well. I'm going to continue everything with Reverend Thomas Bowen, Director for the Mayor's Office of African American Affairs and the Mayor's Office on Religious Affairs as well. Director Bowen, thank you for being here. You got a lot of work on your plate as DC's pastor. That's a tall task, handling both goals of both agencies. How is that working out for you? What is your methods?
Well, I put the blame in a kind way to the Secretary of District of Columbia, our friend Kimberly Bassett, who started telling everyone I was DC pastor. And then before you know it, the mayor's at a mic saying, "Did you know that we have a pastor?" So here I am wearing that cape with pride and honor. Last fall, the mayor decided to have an enhanced Office of African American Affairs. So as such, she named me to be the Director of African American Strategic Engagement, to lead the Office still of Religious Affairs and African American Affairs, to give leadership to our Commission on Father, Men, and Boys, and our Commission on African American Affairs, along with the Mayor's Interfaith Council. She saw that there is a common a thread between all of those offices. And one of the things that she wanted me to work on is to focus on what she calls DC Hope. And DC Hope focuses on health, opportunity, prosperity, and equity. Where the faith community is able to help with that is that we call forth the better angels of the faith community. That every faith tradition has as a part of its belief system the idea and the need to do something for the other, to love thy neighbor as thyself, to first do no harm. And we're just so fortunate to have a vibrant faith community here in DC. Rabbi Bruce Lustig at Washington Hebrew Congregation said that DC is the interfaith capital of the world. And unfortunately, we've learned how to play well in the sandbox. Not that we find ourselves in the same boat, because someone on social media clarified that we're not in the same boat, we're in the same storm. But some folk have boats, some folk have yachts, and some people are drowning in the water. And so we're coming together to challenge each other, to use our resources to help the other. And I learned that during the pandemic. You know, it's funny how people question the faith community. They even question, why is there an office in religious affairs? But in the pandemic, we turned to the faith community from the onset to help us to be credible messengers in the community, to open up their doors. The faith community continued to meet the needs of the most vulnerable members of our community. They risked all that they had, and then with the changing money take, that they decided to still go forward their commitment to feeding those who were vulnerable. And so it's just my charge to help the faith community come together. And oftentimes they beat me to the punch. They're calling, what can we do to help our neighbors here in Washington, DC? One of the sad stories that we know that when, unfortunately, someone succumbed to COVID in their home, there was a need because there was a fear to clean the house. And it's not calling MaidPro for something like that. But don't you know, it's a faith community that came to the aid of district residents to make sure that they had the proper cleaning system and folks to come to sanitize their homes. And that's just been my case. And I know that there have been many reports talking about how faith is in a decline, which is not true. That is that, you know, you can no longer judge a person's faith based upon how often they make their way into the church house, right? And we know there's competition out there, and the competition is not the church down the street. The competition is brunch, and the competition is trying to have that work-life balance, because those who work 5 days a week, bless y'all, and know that they only have their weekend of 2 days, and they have to divvy that up. And so there is still folk in Washington, D.C. Who galvanized by their faith, the need to give back. They don't have to label it. They don't have to make it a part of any organized faith or religion, that somehow they know that the way they were raised, and what they know is that what Maya Angelou says, those who get, give. And as to me, I shall not be moved.
Thank you for stepping up and seeing a need and fulfilling that need. Now, I mean, like many people in the Black community, I grew up in a church. I'm a PK. And I still know that you can't pray away COVID. You can't pray away mental health issues, but there's still a way you can rely on religious strategies. What are those faith-based strategies that we can use to better the health of the Black community?
You must have eavesdropped our conversation last evening. We had a panel, a discussion about Black mental health matters. And we were talking about the faith community. In the church, there's pastoral care, there's pastoral counseling. And there are many places of worship pastors understand that sometimes someone coming to the church is a cry for help. Yes, we can help them at a certain point, but then we need to bring in the professional who can aid them the rest of the way as we continue to walk with them. What we do and need to do more of in the church is to help with the stigma attached to certain things, particularly as it relates to mental health. That you know he just ain't right. It's more than that. And then sometimes there's an embarrassment that happens to folk that when trouble comes and hits, then people feel embarrassed to be at the church, and we have to be more welcoming and embracing than that. And we also understand that Black mental health is health. Prayer works and it helps, but prayer is not the only thing that you can apply. You can't put a letter in an envelope and mail it. You got to put a stamp on that. And so prayer works in conjunction with other things, you know, and in the church, there are a lot of support systems, right? Sometimes it comes because something occurred. The church with the best teen mother program is probably because a church officer or the pastor has someone in their family became pregnant and then realized there's a need to have a support system instead of shaming that individual as if they became pregnant on their own and give the person, the male involved, that, you know, a free ticket. That we have to be more loving, more caring. And so there are churches who get that. I'll use, for example, though, the church where I've served for 20 years, Shiloh Baptist Church, and we built one of the first family life centers. They had the vision and knew that you just cannot be concerned with what happens on Sunday. There's the other 6 days of the week. So guess what they did? They built a gym with a basketball court. They had racquetball courts. They have a sauna. They had lockers. They had a workout room. They had a rooftop there. And then they put the programs along with that. A male youth enhancement program, an AIDS program, a teen mothers program. And so we see that there are a lot of places of worship who are doing these things. So part of my work, again, is to let folk know what they can do by letting them know what other folk are doing. Quite honestly, there are folk who want to do things, they just don't know what to do. And then there are people in the community who do not understand that sometimes that place of worship in the community is about more than a Sunday morning. And they do have programs that they can come and be a part of. Shiloh, at one time, we had a judo program. Folk were coming in to learn judo. Just at the same time they were coming to an AA class in the building. And so the fact or the thought of the church being involved in the totality of someone's life, because there again, faith tells them that their body is a temple. And if you view your body as a temple, you have to treat it a certain way. I was just here listening to Dr. Carter talk as he was, and he's talking about a routine. Well, routine, grandma used to get up every morning. She had a routine. She'd get up before her feet hit the ground. She thanked God for her early rise, and that her bed did not become her cooling board. She put her coffee or her tea on. She sit there with her stale donut that she put in the oven to make it just as good as it was the day before. She's on the phone checking on folk, and that's what they come to understand. I didn't realize until you said something that I have routine, because my alarm goes off between 6:30 and 6:55, because each and every morning I have a 7 a.m. prayer call. And sometimes it's almost like the Karate Kid thing. You're doing it for one purpose, but look at all the benefits. So I didn't set up to have a routine, but guess what, baby? I have a routine each and every morning. And faith helps us along those lines.
All of this that you're saying reminds me of that old adage, just come as you are. It's not like the old traditional church where it's only one version of it. There's something for everyone. And that's so important, especially in a place like the DMV. People come from all over the world. It's a very transient city, and they leave their so-called church home and their church community and their church family, and they're yearning for that fellowship because it's super important. So I definitely want you to share the resources that your agencies offer to kind of connect residents with people who share the same passions, and with those community members that they can really trust.
Yeah, and so my offices, Office of African American Affairs and Religious Affairs are part of the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs. We have a Mayor's Office of Women's Policies and Initiatives on Clean City, which is talking about having people go in the community to beautify their neighborhoods. We have the Office of Veterans Affairs, African Affairs, Asia Pacific Islander Affairs, LGBTQ plus affairs, returning citizens affairs, Latino affairs, and others. And we are charged with connecting with those specific communities, letting them know of the resources we have in DC. There are a lot of resources that we have via some of the mayor priorities and city government. The problem is people don't know about it. And what's the point of having these things if people don't know that they are available? DC is a city that does well by its seniors. Making it a place where they are valued and giving them the resources that need, honoring them. The oldest living in Washington, we honored with the proclamation Black History Month, the oldest Black resident, 105 years old. She didn't stop driving until she was 100. Right.
Wow.
But she still goes out to the senior center and the like. Mine is as strong as can be. So it's the charge of our office that when we encounter folk, right, to help them, to connect them to the resources that they have. Our office does hand out grants to organizations in our community to help us with this work. We're fortunate that we have convening power, that we can bring entities together to help us with the heavy lift that we have and the needs in our city. When the mayor decided that it's going to be all hands on deck because we needed everyone to address the issue of violence in our communities, the phone started to ring. With people and clergy and organizations wanting to do something to help, wanting to be active in the community. We are our greatest resource. And when people decide that they're going to stand up, they're not going to take it anymore, we become even more powerful. The proverb, African proverb, which a certain political figure made a lot of money off of, it takes a village to raise a child. It assumes that the village is healthy. A village that is unhealthy cannot raise our children. So we have to do the work of repairing our communities. And that's one of the things that our office is trying to do, to get the resources to our community and to help them be more vibrant, because we're going to need each other.
I love that. That's super important, to lean on the community and to strengthen the community so it's strong enough to lean on it. If anyone is watching this, I mean, half of us are like, yes, amen. But some people have a little bit of hesitancy, trusting the agencies and really stepping out there, or maybe they're just shy. What can you tell them to kind of strengthen their confidence to get out there, try one of these programs, just give it a shot?
Well, one thing you have to recognize that. You have to recognize when people are just a little weary. You can't blame them for that. It has some roots, and you got to meet them where they are. And that's when you walk a little closer with those individuals to get them to try and to trust. And that's why our work is so important. You know, it's like working with a young person. The last thing a young person needs is someone to show up and then all of a sudden they're gone. They've experienced that enough in their life. It takes a committed people. And when you win a person's trust, when they believe, guess what? They will wind up being the advocates you need to tell someone else who might have been hesitant. Well, I tried it. You just give us a chance. And, you know, they follow through with that. So it's about walking with people until they reach the point of wanting to give it a try. understanding that we then cannot run the risk of being that which caused them to be hesitant in the first place. Government has to do a better job, and we can't have our little feelings hurt or by the fact that there are folk who've been hurt. Sonia Sanchez wrote a little book or a poem that says, "We are wounded in the house of a friend." And when you're wounded by those that you trust, those wounds last and the scars take a long time to disappear. So it's about meeting them where they are, as we've learned through COVID, and trying to get folk to take the vaccine. And some people took a little longer than others, but eventually they did. And then we built ourselves up around their testimony, right? And they became the credible messengers. But we can't shame people because of what they've experienced.
Thank you so much. That is such important work. Thank you for all that you do. And it just goes to the old adage of meeting people where they are and having trust in them, and that we aren't our trauma. I know we're wrapping up, getting close to the end of our program. I don't see anything in the Q&A. You guys can put it in there right now if you want to get a question in. But before we get to that, I want to open the floor up to any of the speakers. We've gone through a lot, but if you have any final thoughts or something you forgot to mention or something you want to leave us with, feel free to jump in.
I just want to add, why is the person who went last going first? That this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm grateful to you, and I'm grateful to DPR. One of the things I've been wanting to do is to have a week of religion, spirituality, health, and wellness, because we need to use all the tools in our belt, and to give space and to help bring it to the attention. All these spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, breathing, walking, journaling. All these are things that I think that our community can benefit from. This is what we try to do in my work. We're saying we're trying to bring the best of all of our traditions.
And there's no time like the present. Black History Month might be coming to an end, but that doesn't mean we can't keep spotlighting Black history and Black health. And if you are going through something, if something stood out to you today, you don't have to keep going through it. Definitely tap into all these resources. All of our speakers told you where you can reach out to them. Don't hesitate to do that. And tap into a lot of the resources that Fit DC has. I'm just so excited to be a Fit DC ambassador and prioritize your health, your mind, your body, and your wellness. I think what we all need to do right now, since it is almost my bedtime, set the alarm, put it in a different room, get your journal out, have it waiting for you for when that alarm hits, right?
Yeah, yes, no, that's great advice. And again, just like as I said before, just really taking control of our lives. And as Reverend Thomas pointed out, we have to do this holistically as a community and individually, and really serve as role models. That's something that growing up, I had so many role models around me, my parents, extended family, and that's something that unfortunately we don't have anymore. So we have to really take that initiative and be the role models for the youth and for the community around us, even an extended community and virtual community, whatever we can actually do to make a difference. I think it's just so critical, and I think that is much of the fabric that's missing in our community today. So I just want to really thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this wonderful group, and definitely anybody out there or any of my fellow panel members, anything you need from me, definitely Reverend, look forward to collaborating with you. I'm right up the road in Maryland. Wherever you need me to be, I'm there to support you, for sure. I'm still a Baptist, grew up in South Louisiana, but I just incorporated some additional ways to basically heal my body. So anything I can do to support any initiative, definitely I look forward to collaborating with any of you or anybody out there, because this is a simple way we can give back and make a difference in our community.
And I think I'll just round out by saying that this is like the intersectionality that we as Black people need to have in our lives, right? So we have our spiritual and mental health and stress and well-being. We have a physician. We have our religious, our spiritual, like religion-based faith, as well as public health. And that's kind of the intersection of all the things, right? And we always hear about all the health disparities amongst African Americans and how that affects different people. But if we really, take Dr. Washington's 4 S's, take Dr. Carter's advice on really how to keep ourselves stress-free and mental health, how we check into our spirituality, like Reverend Bowen talked about, and we can really find a place of health. At DC Health, we look at population health, and we look at trying to ensure that our space can be as healthy and as well as possible. But I think sometimes we forget about that wellness part, right? We'll check in on some of the medical things, but really being in the best place we can be, spiritually, physically, mentally, as far as our stress levels go, especially in times of pandemic when all things feel like they're enormous, even when they may only be the size of a mustard seed. It's really how we need to function moving forward. And so I am excited to be a part of this panel. I'm really happy that Fit DC is doing this and continues to do this work in this space. And I encourage everybody out there to really look at the intersectionality of their own health and wellness to really move themselves forward, pandemic or not.
That's right. We can't pour into anyone else unless our cup is full. So definitely prioritize your health and wellness today. Thank you for spending this night with us. Thank you to all of our speakers. You guys are amazing. I feel so fulfilled right now, and I'm sure everyone tuning in does as well. Thank you not just for being a part of this program, but for all of the programs that you support and create and the resources that you provide us with. I want to thank Fit DC, Aetna, Sky Breath and Meditation. Definitely tap into those Sky Breath and Meditation weekly sessions. Put it on your calendar. Make it a priority that you tap into those as often as possible. Thank all of the people who are on this call for attending. I'm super excited, and I'm honored to be one of the hosts for tonight. You can follow me at It's Britt Waters and continue connecting with this community and get all these resources and information if you missed out on anything at fitdc3.com. That's fitdc3.com. I'm gonna, before we end the call, just pass it over to the Fit DC team.
Thanks again so much, everybody, for. We are going to sign off here. As Britt said, check out all of our information on fitdc3.com. And then you can look for a recording of this. If you missed anything that we spoke about today, you can look for a recording of this, which we will post on the fitdc3.com website later. Thank you guys so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Breathe With Me movement. Our mission is to nurture and sustain a community of care, compassion, and justice. We offer tools to heal from stress, trauma, and the violence of systemic oppression, racism, and injustice. My name is Joanne. Breathe with me.
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 Breathe with us.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.